mix Christian doctrine with Greek doctrine. Get the letter. Brother Dan can tell you how to get it. He brought it to me. I mean, the Pope is very upset. He uses Hellenism, Hellenistic, de-Hellenization, I think 9 times in the speech. He never quotes Peter, Paul, John, Jesus. He mentions Socrates repeatedly. He quotes Socrates. He talks about the synthesis, the mixing of the Christian spirit with the Greek spirit. Well, I know what the Christian spirit is, but tell me what this Greek spirit is. He decries the fact that in the Middle Ages we find trends in theology which would sunder this synthesis between the Greek spirit and the Christian spirit. So it started in the Middle Ages. He said the second stage was Harnack, when he wrote his book on the history of dogma and began to point out how Greek influence had corrupted our Christian understanding. The Pope says that was the second stage. He says we're now in the third stage with Anthony Buzzard, Dan Gill, some of the rest of y'all. No, hey, my book, the Jerusalem Post, when they got a copy of my book, To God Be the Glory, one of the first things they did was went to the Vatican with it. They did. They contacted the Vatican and they said, this guy has written a book challenging your doctrine of the Trinity. Do you want to respond? They said, no thank you. True. A preacher friend of ours pastored a church over in Memphis. And there was a boy in the church, and one day at home he was drawing a picture. And his mother said, son, what is that? He said, Mom, it's a man. He said, well, who is it? She said, it's a false prophet. She said, well, you didn't give him any legs. He said, no. He said, Brother Surratt said a false prophet didn't have any legs to stand on. So we probably ought to talk about Viola and Barna, a couple of guys that wrote a book called Pagan Christianity. Well-known authors. Barna, through his Barna Group, Christian pollster, is called the most quoted Christian of our day. So perhaps I could quote him a little bit. He's written 39 books. His co-author, Viola, has written about 8 books. Both are recognized Christian scholars. They say Constantine's thinking was dominated by superstition and pagan magic. And his story fills a dark page in the history of Christianity. 4th century Christianity was being profoundly shaped by Greek paganism and Roman imperialism. They say Constantine is still living and breathing in our mind. They go on to mention Plato and Aristotle being the schoolmasters whose techniques could be used to bring men to Christ. Talk about our church fathers being steeped in Platonic thought. Listen what they say about modern Christian education. Now they deal mostly, you might want to get that little book, Pagan Christianity. It's shaking up a lot of things. They deal mostly with what they see of Greek influence in Christian practice. Yeah. It doesn't bother me that churches have buildings and pastors and all that. They see the Greek influence in a lot of our practices. What concerns me is the Greek influence in our Christian doctrine. So that's why I'm writing a book about it. But anyway, they say, herein lies the root and stem of contemporary Christian education. It is built on the Platonic idea that knowledge is the equivalent of moral character. Therein lies the great flaw. Plato and Aristotle, both disciples of Socrates, are the fathers of contemporary Christian education. They say present-day Christian education, whether it be seminaries or Bible college, is serving food from the wrong tree. The tree of knowledge of good and evil rather than the tree of life.
Amen.
Right? God help us. So then they say on page 205, Athens is still in our bloodstream. So who is Socrates? If Christianity is following this man, if the Pope quotes him, if he's quoted in Christian pulpits, let me just say this. I love R.C. Sproul. He's a scholar. He's a Christian minister. He's my brother. But I heard a radio series that he did on his radio broadcast. Maybe you're familiar with it. But it's on Western civilization and Western philosophy. By the way, philosophy basically being the love of knowledge. So he focused one program on Socrates, two programs on Plato, two programs on Aristotle, I don't know what all. But anyway, at the end of the broadcast, the announcer would offer the series on CD for any donation of any amount that we may know and better serve the God of theology. Well, I believe that's exactly the problem. We need to get back to serving the God of the Bible. Amen?
Amen.
But I have his series on CD, and I listened to what he said about Socrates. He didn't say one negative thing about the man. He did not mention that Socrates was a pedophile involved with boys as young as 11 years old. He made no negative statements about it. He said that he saved Greek philosophy. He didn't bother to say how. And he said by so doing, or the Greek nation, Athens specifically, and he didn't say how, but he said by so doing he perhaps saved Western civilization. I can't find that. I can tell you why. He helped corrupt a big part of Christianity today because he was focused on the Logos. He was driven to find the Logos, which is divine reason that he thought God had deposited in the minds of people. So history says every morning he got up and went to the market or the gymnasium or out on the streets or workshops and questioned people till he made a terror, they say, of himself. Because he was driven by a demon spirit to find Logos. Now when I say he had a demon spirit, he had a demon spirit. I looked in American Encyclopedia Americana. I looked under demonology. And it referred me right to Socrates. The historical accounts of his trial when he was found guilty by 500 citizens of Athens in 399 and executed by being forced to drink poison in prison. He talked about his demon at his trial. Now folks, let me say this. There's people out there that don't believe there's a devil, and that's your right. But let me just tell you, if there's not a devil, we need to find out who's carrying on his work. I heard about these two guys boxing. Professional fight. One's getting the worst of the deal. And his nose is bloody. his top lips swollen, his eyes almost shut. Every time he gets back over in the corner, his trainer is trying to psych him up. He said, man, he hadn't laid a glove